You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 2. I missed you last week. I was involved with a high-stakes league that I consult for. It was great, good group of guys, but I missed you. I listened to the podcast. The two of you did outstanding. And here we are, week 2. I mean, I say this every year. The season just flies, and a lot of hype surrounding it. This was an unusual year, obviously 2020, for numerous reasons. But we have football. Everybody appears to be healthy. And this past weekend, including Thursday and late into Monday night, early Tuesday morning, felt like normalcy. Like, we deserve football. And it seemed to go okay. Mr. Harris, what's good in Albuquerque, New Mexico tonight?
Wait. You buried the lead. You weren't here Monday? Last week? I missed that. No. I'll roll through the matchups a little bit this week. We're going back to the more traditional format of looking at mostly the DFS matchups. I'll run through some news, but I want to see how Kyle's doing. Really excited for you for the Thursday night game right there in your backyard, Kyle. How excited are you?
Talked about it before the show, so this is, you should know. I mean, I don't know. It is cool. 2 first overall picks. I just watched the entirety of Baker Mayfield play against the Ravens, and oh my God, what a miserable. He looked like Johnny Manziel was my best comp. He was so skittish in the pocket. He was not hitting tight window throws. He couldn't go deep. It wasn't like the Ravens defense, like their defensive line ravaged him. He had some chances to make plays and just could not do it. Joe Burrow, not a perfect game to start off, but his running was sick, and that's something he showed off in college and kind of went under the radar. So, I don't know. It has potential to be fun, but I'm kind of glad it's not on the main slate.
Yeah, like, with the injuries in the middle of the Bengals offensive line, I would like to see Nick Chubb get more on track, or at least a concerted effort to use him from one Kevin Stefanski, now that he realizes the rest of those guys are bums. Or not. I'm just kidding. Okay, Jarvis Landry's questionable in that game if you're listening to this heading into the game, so watch out for that. Nobody else really injured. Randy Bullock, the kicker for the Bengals, is off the injury report. We'll see if that pays off for them after he missed the game winner due to his tender calves on Sunday. And I thought A.J. Green looked good in that game too, which kind of excited me since I'm so heavily invested. We'll look at some news quickly. The biggest story heading into the Monday night game in Las Vegas, the first game in the Death Star. Michael Thomas has a high ankle sprain that seems likely to cost him a few games. The initial reporting was, wow, maybe he can work his way back. I'll just remind everyone, Saquon Barkley, the apparently the fastest healer on earth, took him about 3 weeks to come back from a high ankle sprain last week. That's about the shortest I've seen someone do that. So we'll see what Thomas can do. Wasn't a great game for him. Alvin Kamara looks very fast, though. Expect to see a heavy dose of him. Kenny Galladay's status still uncertain. He missed that first game and missed the opener with a hamstring injury. Did not practice Wednesday. He'll be one to watch. Chris Godwin in Tampa dealing with a concussion in the protocol. We don't know that he actually has the concussion, but he is in the protocol. So watch as he works his way through that. Mike Evans played on his injured hamstring against the Saints. Didn't do much. Bruce Arians would like to get him more involved. Tom Terrific wasn't as terrific as we like, but we'll see how that one plays out. Maybe a more favorable matchup against the Carolina Panthers. We'll have some of you fellows talking about him as a DFS play. George Kittle has a knee issue. Kind of disappeared the second half of the Cardinals game due to that same injury. He suffered it late in the first half. He will not practice all week, likely. Still, Kyle Shanahan says he has a chance to play even without practicing. Brandon Ayuk still a little nicked up, but seems to be trending in the right direction. Not a lot in the receiving core there. James Conner, ankle injury, cost him most of the game. Benny Snell fared quite well against the Giants on Monday Night Football. The Steelers have left the light on for Conner, but I wouldn't bank on that. Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster did not practice Wednesday. Seems like a maintenance thing with the Monday night, the short turnaround. Miles Sanders, expected to play this week, was a scratch on Saturday, basically last week. He didn't make the trip to Washington to face the football team. seems to be on track to play this week. I wonder if he'll get a really full workload. This will be his first game back. He's been dealing with this hamstring issue since early in August, so don't get too excited, people. Le'Veon Bell on IR. Frank Gore will be your back of record heading into this one. Your starting running back of record for the Jets. LaMichael Pirine won't play either, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue. Denzel Mims on IR as well for the Jets. An offense that seems not great. Cortland Sutton hopes to return this week after missing the opener with a shoulder injury. Seems like he'll be on track. Philip Lindsay in that same game injured his toe. Seems like he'll miss a week or two. Beyond that, there are various injuries. You need to tune into the footballdiehards.com main page. Check the headline news. Check the staff rankings for links to all the latest information on all the injured players this week. We'll carry that right up through Sunday's kickoffs, each set of kickoffs. So we'll keep you on top of that. With that, fellows, I want to hear your takes on DFS plays. Hopefully you can leverage some of these issues into some big money for me and the listeners. Justin, we'll start with you. At quarterback, who's on your list?
Well, the list is long, but unfortunately it's not a buffet. We can't have everything, so we do have to kind of condense that list. I mean, right at the top, you have Lamar Jackson on the road at Houston.
That tastes good.
Yeah, it does. It tastes good. I do not know that I'm going there quite yet. Again, it's Wednesday, so it's early. Revelations happen. Minds are changed. And a shade beneath him, you'll have Patrick Mahomes, who didn't look like Patrick Mahomes against the Chargers last year in a magnificent way. This is a stingy secondary. I think even though Derwin James is not there, you still have Casey Hayward and Chris Harris is there. So I'll have it's tough not to play Lamar Jackson or have a little bit of Mahomes and Jackson because of their upside, and you don't want to be left behind. But I'm not gravitating towards them heavily this week because you don't have to spend $7,700 or $8,200 for Lamar Jackson. I'm going right back to Aaron Rodgers at home against a dinged, slayless Lions secondary. They are hurt. Currently, he's obviously not on the team, but Aaron Rodgers looked like the Aaron Rodgers we were accustomed to a couple years ago with Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and who did he lean on? Well, not just Devontae Adams, who was spectacular, but he hit everybody. MVS was in the equation. Al Mazar did his thing. So for $6,900 at Lambeau against the Lions, like I want in, and I want in a lot. Like tick underneath him. I'm not going to go over every quarterback, cannot, but the Cowboys-Falcons game has the ingredients of a shootout. Now, as much as I love the pieces on this Cowboys team, Kyle and I were texting about it earlier, Dak Prescott stands out. We saw what Russell Wilson did to the Falcons in Atlanta last weekend. I don't know that the passing volume will be there for Dak Prescott. I love him at $6,800. I don't know that he has 30-point upside on DraftKings. I love CeeDee Lamb. I love Michael Gallup. I love Amari Cooper and Zeke, obviously, and Matt Ryan for that matter. So it's going to be, first and foremost, I'm going to have the most Aaron Rodgers, it would appear, tonight. I do like Josh Allen as rushing equity in Miami. Obviously, you can get it done with his legs. This is a kid where you're hoping that he lands on his face, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, I know the Jets is not a perfect example, and neither will the Dolphins be to show his stardom, but it looked good, and he was doing his vintage Josh Allen thing, which hasn't been going on for a long time. So I'll have a little bit of Allen. I'll mention two more plays before we can hand it off to Kyle, and he can piggyback on some of the plays that I mentioned. I think it is a tune-up game, or for Tom Brady to get back on his feet. I think it was not necessarily pretty in New Orleans. They get a lot of calls. He's going to see a lot of if they're going to go deep, they're going to see the Saints again, and it's not going to be a walk in the park. I think Mike Evans, even though he played a ton, is hobbling a little bit. Chris Godwin got concussed. He may be without him this week. The running game got going. Bruce Arians was true to his word about Ronald Jones. The O-line is beefed up. It's a good defense. Just going to take time for him, like everyone else, to become cohesive with the offense around him. I mean, he was here for 20 plus years. It's a new scene. They're going to be just fine. Love Tom Brady. Love him at home against Carolina. I think he absolutely lights them up. And one more name I'll mention is Kyler Murray at home against Washington. The Skins, gentlemen, were 2K last week for defense. I wanted to have him everywhere. Should have had him everywhere. It was dicey. They were phenomenal on every level of defense, particularly the secondary. So it concerns me a tad with Jimmy Moreland. I mean, in that secondary, but I think in the 405 game, I want me some Kyler Murray. I love the instant rapport with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm probably going to stack that game. I think he's too cheap. I've been cynical about Kyler Murray and maybe Patrick Mahomes a few years ago, but I think Kyler Murray is coming to his own. He has DeAndre Hopkins now. 6,100. I'm right there.
Hold on. I'm doing a memo to myself. Streamline for week 3. Ask Justin who he doesn't like at quarterback. Kyle. And before we get into that, I will say on Josh Allen, the interesting thing, Brian Dable, the offensive coordinator, talked about how the running that he did against the Jets was a game plan. It was something they determined in advance based on the matchup. Would not be surprising to see a similar game plan against the Dolphins, a team he's had great success against and run well against in the past. So, Kyle, give me your 400 quarterbacks.
I left them a couple.
I am looking at the guys Justin hasn't named who are scoring any fantasy points, and I see Robert Griffin III and Chris Streveler, the backup Cardinals quarterback, who got in for one big man play. There are no other starting quarterbacks. Now, I will be brief. I will go with 2 rushing quarterbacks. Kyler Murray last week on DraftKings had the 100-yard bonus as a rusher, and he kneeled from the shotgun for -9 yards on 2 kneels and lost it. He has 3.3 point upside with that double bonus. For me, that's a guy I want to buy in. He's just discount Lamar Jackson and Tyrod Taylor. It's an ugly Tyrod Taylor-led offense, but they played the Kansas City Chiefs, who forced their opponents to at least attempt to score points. I'm not sure how many points Tyrod Taylor can put up, but at 5,300, a guy with rushing upside and some of the best weapons in the game, I think he's a guy you can go to and run him back with a lot of Chiefs. I like guys with rushing upside. I like guys who are going to drop back a lot, and I love good game totals. This game features that, and the Cardinals sneakily has around 57, depending on your books. These are 2 games you can get in on at relatively cheap cost, and you can get a lot of rushing production out of your quarterback. They have great stacking options. I'm not sure why they're not going to be. I don't think they'll be popular, and I don't know why.
I was a week early on Tyrod Taylor, apparently, and a week late on Kyler Murray on my DFS 3 and out. Apologies to those. I had 500. Come on, it's the first week. Kyle, your running back plays.
For me, running back, I'm going to stick in the same game and start off with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The dude he was top 5 and I believe led all running backs in expected points. He just struggled at the goal line, which I don't think is necessarily something that you can project going forward. Maybe he's not the best goal line back. He's not going to be a giant bruiser. He's not, a Saquon Barkley level size speed specimen who can just push guys over. But he's on the Chiefs. He's going to do fine scoring touchdowns going forward. We already saw him get a massive rushing workload. The receiving will come as the team scores points, throws the ball more, or he will just continue to rack up 20-plus carry games. It's a binary set of outcomes. They play competitive and they throw to him, or they don't, they bury their opponents, and he gets to run out the clock in the 4th quarter. For me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 7,400 is one of the better values on the slate. Then there is the duo of Kenyon Drake at 5,900 and Jonathan Taylor at 5,700. Both are cash game viable. They're just underpriced relative to their role. Jonathan Taylor without Marlon Mack is going to get most of, if not all of the between the tackles carries. Nyheim Hines is a concern, but we did see Taylor catch 6 passes in his debut. I mean, Phillip Rivers is going to check it down to whoever is on the field. It won't always be Jonathan Taylor, especially not on 3rd downs, but if they are passing on a 2nd down, on a 1st down, you can bet he is at least going to look at Jonathan Taylor. Kenyon Drake, a similar situation. I think he's going to be a bit more owned, so I think in tournaments you want to find ways to leverage Drake's ownership, because I do think Chase Edmonds is a similar type of concern. He got 5 targets compared to Drake's 2, much in the way that we saw Hines take away a bit from Taylor, but the ownership seems to be really skewing towards Kenyon Drake.
So Justin, look at your list of running backs, circle the top 3 that you really like and leave the other 800 off and go.
All right. Well, I mentioned I think I'm going to have some Christian McCaffrey, because I will have a stack or 2 of that Bucs game. On the Brady side, you're going to have to run it back with somebody unsure if it's going to be McCaffrey. I don't know that you got to go 10K. They plugged the run as well as anybody last year, but Christian McCaffrey is obviously the exception to the rule in regards to all the receptions. So, iffy on McCaffrey. And I'm also with you on Saquon Barkley, given the condition of that offensive line. I think it's a good bounce back spot. I think people will be off him. I will have a small dose. Again, can't have everybody. I am going to hit the smash button on Zeke Elliott, for sure at 8,200. Love him in this spot. I mean, we talk about the wide receivers on that team. I think, Zeke tonight is you could make an argument he's the best running back in the game. It's a game that's going to shoot out. For sure, Ezekiel Elliott will be a staple in the majority of my lineups, as well as Derrick Henry, a guy that really scares me, largely in part because of his lack of involvement in the passing game. But the guy had 3 receptions last week for 15 yards, and we'll take it on top of 31 carries. So 34 touches. I mean, he owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, sub 8K. Like, they're going to be up. They're going to run the football. He's going to end up with 25, 26, 27 DraftKings points, and I'm going to move on, and that's that. So Derrick Henry and Zeke are going to be staples of my lineups. I definitely agree as far as CEH with Kyle. I think that's a sneaky spot. Is still iffy on Mahomes, but it behooves all of us to have pieces of that Chiefs offense. I think he's the guy. I mean, he's another guy right out of the gates, 30 touches. A little surprising, but we love that volume. In terms of Miles Sanders, I'm going to question mark here. There's another old line that does not look great. I mean, we want to see Miles Sanders as much as we want to see anybody just be unleashed. I think this is a spot for the Eagles to bounce back at home. I love the 6K. Is he going to be limited? What's Doug Peterson going to do? What kind of committee? So I'm hesitant on Sanders. It's a shorter list with running backs, which you like, which we all like, because I don't have to make as many decisions like quarterback or wide receiver. So if I'm paying down, it's going to be Benny Snell, but we are seeing more and more committees. He mentioned Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines, and Hines is going to be that Woodhead for Phillip Rivers. Little cheaper than Jonathan Taylor, but we like the receptions. DraftKings, you are rewarded for receptions. So it's going to be a short list of running backs. And the last guy I'll talk about is going to be Raheem Mostert. I think the Niners are going to spank the Jets in East Rutherford. When you look at the Niners team, especially with Debo on IR and George Kittle dinged, it's an offense where I was scratching my head last week and I'm like, I need a wide receiver here on this team. Is it going to be Jerick McKinnon? Can I go there? With Dante Pettit, what am I doing? Kendrick Bourne, and so their identity is to run the football, and they're going to be up, and he is somewhat touchdown dependent. There's a committee there as well, but I like the script for the backfield in San Francisco, so I will go there as well. And that's about the end of my list here on Wednesday night as far as running backs.
Wow. So on the Miles Sanders, Aaron Donald also, that in the offensive line, those two things, concerns,
Sure.
And wondering if he gets a full workload as well. I mean, first game back after missing almost all of August. That's probably when he'll be dominant. The way the world works. The fantasy gods will smite me down. Justin, smite me down with your mighty list of wide receivers.
So Michael Thomas was 9K last week. And you're getting pretty much that in Devontae Adams at this point in time. I mean, it's that simple. I think we all knew it was going to occur because of how, I don't want to call the Packers offense vanilla, but it somewhat is when it comes to a name standpoint. I mean, there's not a ton of weaponry there outside Adams, even though everybody got involved last week. It would appear. So Adams is right at the top. I think he's underpriced at 8,100. I think what you're going to get out of him every single week. And against the dinged up secondary, as I talked about, there's going to be a lot of Devontae Adams and a lot of Aaron Rodgers on my team. And I'm just not going to think twice about it. You could go back to DeAndre Hopkins in the same scope. Another guy is underpriced. I mentioned the Redskins defense last week, or how they played. I think they can, piggyback on that. I can call them the Redskins, the Washington football team. I apologize. Sometimes defensive performances like that, it can go a long way in terms of confidence. So I'll have some Hopkins. I do like stacking that game with Terry McLaurin. There's a tight end in that game that I will use as well. Talk about him later. As far as that Dallas-Atlanta game, I am more than likely going to stack it, and more than likely like I do every week. And again, Julio Jones is a Q tag, but it is Wednesday, so that means squat to us. I'm going to have Calvin Ridley, and I'm going to have him at a discount off of Julio Jones. I might have them both in this game if I can afford to, but I will definitely have Calvin Ridley in that game. 6,800, the price is right. He's coming into his own. I think this is a perfect week for Allen Robinson. All the scrutiny surrounding his contract. He saw Cooper Kupp get paid. He saw Keenan Allen get paid. He's seen some of these big contracts. He wants the money. Little disgruntled. Deleted some stuff on Instagram. 6,400. Love that stack. By the way, I mentioned Mitchell Trubisky. I think A-Rob, his ceiling is nearly as high as anybody. So at 6,400, I will go there against the Giants for certain. Absolutely. I think it's another good spot. I mentioned the Bucks-Panthers game where I'm going to stack. It was very surprising last week, gentlemen. I know Kyle likes DJ Moore as much as anybody, but it was a Robbie Anderson week. And it just, on paper, when you look at Teddy being a low A-dot guy and Anderson being a high A-dot guy, they don't match up. It's not a good fit there. Anderson went ham. DJ Moore did little. So people will be off Moore. I think this is a good time to get back on DJ Moore. He is the guy there. We love him. We think he's a top 12 or 13 NFL wide receiver. So right in that scope, you have Amari Cooper. Going to have Amari Cooper in the Atlanta-Dallas stacks. You have to. Cooper's going to command 10 targets each and every week. So I'm right there in the higher end range as far as wide receivers from, say, 6K up. You mentioned a couple more guys while it's my turn, I suppose. Mentioned Terry McLaurin. I think he's going to come in at a low ownership. I think it's a sneaky stack out there in Arizona. If you're going to do Nuke Hopkins, you can run it back with Terry McLaurin. Who else are you going to run it back with? Maybe Sims. So I'll get back on Terry McLaurin. Kind of busto week one. It's a good spot. And Keenan Allen, 5,700. Like, the guy doesn't get the recognition he should get. This is a script where the Chargers should be losing. He's going to get fed. I think the hesitancy in fantasy circles was the unclear rapport with Tyrod Taylor. And that kind of showed, which Mike Williams is dirt cheap this week. I think he's certainly in play. He got 10 targets, even though he was dinged. So not playing Keenan Allen. I'll probably have some Mike Williams. We mentioned Mike Williams a few weeks ago, kind of being Tyrod Taylor's version of Sammy Watkins from Buffalo. So I'll have a piece of the Chargers passing game for certain. And it definitely won't be Tyrod Taylor. I can't figure out the thought process there. Last guy we'll mention, even though I want to mention five more, but
we'll go 500. Why not?
Is going to be Jamison Crowder. The game. I mean, this is another offense where you look at it, there is nothing going on, but a guy that is going to get 8, 10, 12, 13 targets last week, just force-fed, negative game scripts. They're going to have to throw. He's too cheap. 5,400, 27 DraftKings points last week. They're going to be down. They're going to be down at home. Sam Darnold's going to have to throw the ball. Like, you don't play him, you could screw yourself. He's a cheap piece, and he allows you to get Derrick Henry and Zeke into the lineups, which they're going to be in a lot of mine. So that's about the list for now. There are some other players. I'm sure Kyle will talk about them.
Devontae Adams was one of my hits last week. He seemed really easy. He seems really easy to get this week. I like that Crowder play. And Mike Williams looked really good coming off that injury that some people thought would cost him an entire month. Apparently not. Kyle, wide receivers, go.
Yeah, you mentioned one guy like Mike Williams. We can play Jamison Crowder with Sam Darnold as quarterback facing the 49ers, but heaven forbid Tyrod Taylor, a horrible downgrade from god-awful Sam Darnold and Adam Gase as his coach. Can't play any of Tyrod Taylor's weapons. I like Mike Williams, like you said. That seemed all of the negative buzz around him, potentially not even playing in September, seems to have just been not true, been completely false. So for me, he's a guy who led his team in air yards and targets. I'm totally going to be in on him. A few more guys. Michael Gallup, I think, is an interesting leverage play. He's going to be relatively high owned, but not Amari Cooper owned. Amari Cooper looks to be the chalkiest of the chalk on the slate. I think if Michael Gallup gets 2 long balls last week, he had an ADOT of over 15. If he catches 2 long balls, that's 2 drives where Amari Cooper doesn't really get the chance to play. If he just goes for a 40-yard catch, a 30-yard catch, those are targets that completely disappear off the board. So maybe a way you could leverage Amari Cooper ownership, sort of like we saw last week, especially if Gallup scores the touchdowns. Calvin Ridley ends up being the better play out of him and Julio Jones because he's the touchdown scorer, and that's what you needed from that game was to secure the touchdowns and then move on to the Packers. So for me, Gallup is maybe the way you can leverage that and not get fully chalky by stacking Dallas, which kind of concerns me because I don't know how different you can get when you're playing the most popular plays of the slate. My favorite play by far, though, is Will Fuller. I just don't get how a guy who is going to have over 30% target share, or at least he did last week, and over 40% of air yard share. And those are Deshaun Watson targets. Those are Deshaun Watson air yards. These are premium targets and premium air yards because he is such a talented quarterback. They're going to operate this offense entirely through Will Fuller. He's a guy who can make tremendous splash plays on a weekly basis. He faces a tough matchup against the Ravens, but I don't think that matchup is going to scare me off because I do see how the Ravens can put up a ton of points and force the Texans to throw the ball. So Will Fuller, probably one of my absolute favorite plays on the slate. I'm going to say he's my absolute favorite play. His price at 6,300 just seems so low for a guy who's going to command so much of his offense. It's below guys who aren't even guaranteed to be their number one receiver, like Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, all of these guys ahead of Will Fuller, despite him being a number one receiver for Deshaun Watson. So I absolutely want to get on him. I think Tyreek Hill ownership could be a little low for a relatively good spot. Their team, as always, has a high implied team total in a game that I like. So I could see myself, I'm going to have some run backs if I run a handful of Tyrod Taylor stacks. I'm going to have some run backs. Some of it could be Sammy Watkins, as Justin mentioned. I like that call. Tyreek Hill on the other side, I think makes sense as well.
Kyle, give me the best tight ends. Leave Justin 14.
So I am going to, after getting to talk about almost no starting quarterbacks, some running backs, and no receivers, I'm going to steal Justin's. Logan Thomas, as he alluded to earlier, is a great call. Led his team in targets, air yards, and I believe was third in terms of their skill position snaps, just behind Steven Sims and Terry McLaurin. He's a dude who's super athletic. It's not awfully surprising that he's having a late career breakout. He came into the league as a quarterback out of Virginia Tech, was big, tall, fast, and a guy who you could see him succeeding in any position because of his athleticism. It was just going to take some time and the opportunity. I think he has both of those. Looking up, I'm concerned with this George Kittle injury, so I think maybe it makes sense to pivot off of him to a guy like Mark Andrews. Just another way to attack this game. I could see myself going with a lot of Deshaun Watson stacks and bringing it back with Andrews. Travis Kelce, okay play, but his price at 7K is a bit prohibitive. I think you swap down to a guy like Mark Andrews. One other guy, Dallas Goedert, 5K. I think we are going to see Dallas Goedert become his team's number one receiver. Zach Ertz struggling with his team to get a new contract. The Eagles don't want to give him the big money he wants. Is that possibly because Dallas Goedert is their future number one? It would not shock me that they see Dallas Goedert as the guy, goes over 100 and scores in his week one performance. I see Dallas Goedert at 5K as just, a receiver or a second number one tight end. He's not a number two tight end on his team. He's a second one or just a wide receiver. 5K is too cheap for Goedert.
I'd like you to dive into the sea of mediocrity, Justin. And if you don't get all the way to Dan Arnold, I will be sadly disappointed.
Yeah, it's murky. And, I cannot envision myself paying for George Kittle, like Kyle said. I think Mark Andrews, who I did not play last week, and I should, you look at Mark Andrews, or you look at Lamar Jackson, who's going to get the football? Right, Mark Andrews, first guy that comes to your head. And he did his thing last week, 6,300. I don't know that there's a necessity. 6,300, I like that discount off of Kittle, so I'll probably go there. I'm not going to spend 5,200 on TJ Hawkinson. I think that's a ripoff. He's a 4K guy for me. If we're going to have Chargers pieces and it's not going to be Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, I think it's got to be Hunter Henry. We like him. Little pricey for me there. I don't trust Hunter Henry. I think he's a no-D away from an injury. Higbee is a guy, this is a position where I try to differentiate myself from, and I try not to spend, and I try to zero in on one or two. And I think Higbee is in a spot this week at 4,700. Goff likes him, without Brandon Cooks and Gurley in that running game. And you're vacating a lot of targets are missing there. A couple of years ago, I would have told you Gerald Everett was the guy. It is Higbee. I think he's got top 5 upside in season-long leagues. Completely off Hayden Hurst for certain. 2 more names I'll mention will be Noah Fant. We're going to go back to Noah Fant, even though I'll tell you what, that Pittsburgh Steelers defense is a top 5 unit. Any way you carve it, I think that Noah Fant will be Drew Lock's safety blanket former basketball player frame, Antonio Gates-esque, like a young Jimmy Graham hybrid, 4,400. Like, I'm in. I'm in on Noah Fant on the road. I don't think he's going to be wildly owned. So give me some of that. And you won't talk me off Jonnu Smith at 4,200. Your boy Delaney Walker finally sailed off into the sunset at 46 years old. We've been getting the Smith hype for what feels like 3 or 4 years. He is the real deal. It's a Titans offense that I can definitely call vanilla, and I will, despite what Corey Davis did last week. And I know we like Corey Davis bouncing back. So I'll have some Jonnu Smith, sure. And Kyle mentioned the youngster in Washington, Logan Thomas, going to stack that game. He's going to be a part of it. 3,600. Give me some of that. Bobby, you mentioned Dan Arnold. And by the way, one thing we know, and Bob will attest to this, said it 100 times on this podcast over the years, the Arizona Cardinals haven't been able to cover a tight end in what seems like 15, 20 years. So we always attack that area against them. 3,600, I'll have the most of Logan Thomas, Splasher Herndon, and maybe not Dan Arnold. I think there's too many pieces.
Buda Baker figured out how to slow down George Kittle, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Justin, one defense.
I've looked at defenses for a couple days now, ever since the prices came out, which was late Sunday night. And, last week, you could go down to Washington. A lot of people did. They were 2K, and they were the best defense on the slate outside of the Baltimore Ravens. Last year, the Patriots were operating like, 20 points for the first 9 weeks of the year. I think tonight it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. 3,800, they're at home. You get a young quarterback who's going to be without Phillip Lindsay. Not that says a ton. Might be without Cortland Sutton. Going to make mistakes at Heinz Field. I'd like to say that it's a tough place to play, but none of these places are without any fans. So it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers for me.
Kyle, all the rest of the defenses.
Yes, this is what I've been waiting for. Now, I will just give you two. I'll be short. Jets, they face at home a San Francisco team that just unfortunately has been ravaged by injuries. I'm not sure in what capacity we see any of their players. Brandon Ayuk seems like he could play, and as does George Kittle. They're both possible. George Kittle played last week and clearly didn't seem like George Kittle. I'm not sure Brandon Ayuk missing a handful of practices is going to be good for him as a developing rookie. I just can't see any way. This team, they're facing like their bad doppelganger in the Jets. The Jets have no weapons. The Jets having Jamison Crowder might be better than what San Francisco rolls out. That is bad. That is very bad. So the Jets at 2K. And then, I think maybe in tournaments I'd be looking to get up to the Washington defense. Kyler Murray led the league in sacks last year, and they're starting 4 first-round offensive linemen, including Chase Young. I can just see them, even if this game has a number of points scored by the Arizona side, getting to Kyler Murray time and time again. So those are the two defenses I'll be most overweight on this week.
All right.
I'm just going to say on these whole Dan Arnold thing, maybe the third best player in the league behind John Brown and the great Will Dissly. So it's something you should watch for going forward, everybody. Want to thank you for showing up for the Football Diehards podcast. Be sure you go to the website, footballdiehards.com. We have tons of news, information, articles, analysis, audio, video, everything you need to get your season rolling and get off to a fast start, including the Fantasy GM, something that will help you manage all your teams better and in less time, leaving more time to savor your amazing victories that will be garnered from all the articles, mostly by Kyle and Justin, but some other people too. So check all that out, everybody. Shall we say goodnight?
Yeah, what a killer promo. Everyone check that stuff out. We have a ton of awesome stuff going on. I know Emil's happy about this. We have ownership, which is really so much of what we end up talking about is just how to gain leverage over the field. Projections are great, but they only tell so much of the story. That is really one of, I think, my favorite additions to Diehards this year is just such a simple but important factor in attempting to take down large field tournaments. So check out our ownership as well. For myself at Kyle Tweets here, for Bob at Football Diehard, and Justin at Justin Lonero. We will catch you next week.